Welcome to the Church Advice Forum. This is for AV professionals, and there's a little bit of history that we're going to go into, but we thank you for joining us today as we come to you to sort of talk about the AV work that we're doing in our churches and the issues we may be having, the problems, but some of the successes as well. And so that we can help each other during this time of isolation. And we have to do things so much differently than we're used to. We can't all meet, we can't all get together, but we still have some of the same issues trying to get our church services out. So we are introducing ourselves. There's 4 of us here, and I would like you to meet us. And then we will go into prayer. I have to my right in the top box is Colin Sandy of Sandy Audiovisual, a gentleman I've known for quite a few years. In the bottom, Karel Holness, another gentleman that I've actually known quite a few years. Some of you may know him as well. His face gets around. And then there's his brother Alex, who has been helping out. Each one of us are audiovisual professionals, but we're also volunteers at our churches. And we thought we would get together and sort of talk about some of the work we've been doing during this shut-in, some of the issues we've been having, but like I said, some of the successes, so that we can sort of uplift each other and at the same time share some knowledge. And we hope this is something that'll be ongoing, that even after the shutdown is uplifted and we are going back to our regular lives, that we'll be able to reconnect, maybe starting out in the Washington, D.C. area where each of us resides, but then branching out and covering as many people and places as we can. So let's go ahead and start with prayer. Colin, can you lead us in prayer today?
Certainly. Our Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for allowing us to come together to share and learn as we speak to our colleagues and in furtherance of your ministry. We ask you, Lord, to be with us, guide our tongues, let us partake in wisdom and humility. I ask you, Lord, to bless us, bless those especially who are dealing with this current crisis on the front lines. Help them and help those who are serving them so that they may serve others, and help us here today that we may help others get out your message during this time. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Colin. Now, I'm going to give each of us a chance to introduce ourselves, give our backgrounds, and then we'll go right into discussions. One gentleman wasn't able to be with us tonight, but he was able to send his video in, so we'll be able to hear from him. So let's start with Karel.
Hey everybody, my name is Karel Holness. I am the media director over at Metropolitan Seventh-day Adventist Church. We work with the Metropolitan Media Ministry. Also, for my day job, I actually work over at the General Conference dealing with the Media Services Department there. It's a pleasure to be in contact with you guys and to try to help disseminate some information and hopefully spread and start up a community that can help each one of you with the resources that are out there and information that you may not readily get from somewhere else. So glad to be here and look forward to linking up with you guys and facilitating the conversation forward.
All right, and next we will talk to Alex Holness.
So I'm Alex Holness. My day job, I'm a senior research engineer at a small tech company in Beltsville, Maryland. As far as my media credentials, I'm the team lead for the broadcast and record audio team at Metropolitan Seventh-day Adventist Church. So we're tasked with creating our mix for our stream, for our audio, and also creating high quality 2-track masters for duplication and dissemination.
And last but not least, well, technically I would be last, but last but not least is Colin Sandy.
I'm Colin Sandy. I'm CEO of Sandy Audiovisual. We're federal, state, and local government contractors in the audiovisual space. I also volunteer at the Capitol Hill Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm on the AV team there, and I volunteer when I can on occasion at the New Hope Seventh-day Adventist Church.
All right. And I am your host, Robert Baker. I have been doing church AV ministry for quite a long time. You can see the gray in my beard now, going on 20-something years. I also started a company about 10 years ago doing audiovisual consulting based on the knowledge I have. And we all got together with the idea of we each attend different churches. The problems can't be that much different from one church to the next, right? We all have production, we all have people we have to deal with, we all have equipment we have to deal with. So why don't we get together and sort of talk about these issues? Now, we had formed this idea before the shutdown. So we were all going to invite everyone from the DMV area to get together at either Metro, at Capitol Hill, at Brinklow, and maybe sit down and talk about some of the challenges, sort of swap horror stories, and then also share some equipment ideas. Because why reinvent the wheel? If Colin is doing something successful, he can share it with Karel. If Karel is doing something successful, he can share it with Alex. So let's all get together. And then many of us also work at the different levels of the church. We work at the GC, NAD, Allegheny East. So let's just talk about these things together. So one of these things I'm going to ask these gentlemen is, first of all, let's hear some success stories. We can't meet like we wanted to, but we can still share some of the successes we've had during this COVID-19 shutdown. Y'all can speak up freely.
Well, I'll jump in. I've been very, very happy with Brandon leads our team at Capitol Hill Church, and Pastor Emil Peeler has really stepped into this distant preaching. You wouldn't know that he's actually preaching to a camera when you look at the service every week. He's really embraced the technology. I'm kind of dreading the day when they say, you can't even have one person in a building. You just have to stay 6 feet away from everyone, no matter where you are. It has really, I think, tightened up the church service in general. It's amazing that what took maybe 3 hours to accomplish is now 90 minutes, and you get the same sermon, you get the children's story, you get praise and worship. And I think there's a different mindset when you're kind of doing a broadcast, or your audience is not in the room with you. And I don't know if we'll go back from where we are here. It has really opened up the eyes to possibility. I think a big positive thing that came out of this in a nutshell is those people who are naysayers as far as having an online church or acknowledging your online congregation, I think now think differently.
One of the things that I've seen is we have pre-production meetings now. We've been begging for this for years. Just let's go over what's going on. What media is supposed to go up? When is it supposed to go up? And now we finally have it because we're forced to have it. Now we have to communicate over miles. So I think that's one of the great things for us. I mean, I just got an email 10 minutes ago, pre-production meeting tomorrow at 1:00. Great. Now, what's going to happen once we end up back in the facilities? Are we still going to be are we going to go back to the old way of doing things?
I think that's pretty much the challenge that we all kind of face. This whole situation has kind of put things on blast, whether we wanted to acknowledge it or not. When it comes down to being intentional about how you plan out your meetings or how you're going to execute X, Y, and Z, you know, we're seeing that it takes everybody being on the same page. And, you know, things that we might have taken for granted because, hey, we had a rundown, we had things, and everybody kind of just knew the flow. Now we kind of had to go and break that up and revamp it and try to figure out ways how to make everything fit together. Whether it's making things come together technologically, making things come together logistically. You know, you have challenges not only with, like, say, the media departments trying to step up and handle things. You have limitations with folks that may not understand the video conferencing platform that you're using, right? So we've actually had to have even production technical meetings to go over some of the best practices for, like, what you do with your cameras or your webcam, and where you should sit, how you get good lighting, all these things that have to get looked at that people may not necessarily think about when, you know, you're doing a video conference with your loved ones, or, you know, another situation where you may not have to have it look that great. But the real big thing that's been the takeaway is the work ethic and the pulling together that everybody's had to do, from those putting together the program to those doing the technical stuff, and marrying all that stuff together and making it all work and doing it remotely, which is tough. You know, working in a control room with multiple people, you don't have that luxury anymore. You know, you got two or three people now that may be working on the switching and the cameras, or, you know, working the computer apparatus, which I know Robert knows quite well right now. So, you know, as you look to try to pull things together, you know, we're trying to figure out the best ways to make it all work and make everybody happy. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, what are we about? It's about community.
I will admit moderating and switching is a little bit difficult. Yeah, I've already made about 6 mistakes. So
It's fine. It doesn't change their paychecks for this.
not in the slightest.
We're not getting paid?
We're getting exposure. It works for the musicians, right? We're getting exposure. There's something to be said for that.
So Alex, what have you seen?
I mean, I think there's successes. I think we had been talking about putting together a media conference to basically provide educational opportunities for the DMV workforce in terms of volunteers in this space that could potentially be scalable to other locales and, you know, utilize modern tools. I think if you had said a year ago there's going to be a massive pandemic that's going to force people inside, they might not have believed you, and, you know, you could have said that would have been a compelling reason to have media education. But, you know, unfortunately it took these circumstances. But after this, I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to try and show people, decision makers and leaders that have to cast vision, to consider what the investment is going to be and why it's important. I think this really underscores the importance of planning ahead. Those that were prepared or had resources and assets in place prior to this are definitely ahead of the curve, because catching up has been very difficult given the demand and logistics. So I guess in a weird way, there's a success there. And I think the other thing is you can see where the priority has to be in terms of getting community. And it's not that you can't form community over the internet. I have a couple examples that I may bring up later, but I think one of the successes is it's kind of made people reprioritize and understand what the priorities really need to be in terms of being effective and what it means to be a church in these modern times.
Thanks, Alex. I agree. I don't think we can go back to business as usual. So what are we going to do coming out of this? I mean, the gospel still stays the same. The message still stays the same. But disseminating it and pushing it out is going to have to be different. We're going to have to acknowledge that there's some people who are not going to want to go back into the building. Even when they give the all clear, you know, there's going to be that rush of people who want the contact. But there's going to be a lot of people who are like, this thing has not really gone away. Let me just stay home for a couple more weeks, and we have to still be able to minister to those people too. So we are at the point now where each of you is going to give a presentation along with Pastor Will, who couldn't be with us tonight. And we are going to be starting with Colin. And Colin, so give us a brief overview and then you jump right into your talk.
Sure. And I don't know if I'm going to take all my allotted times. I'd rather get questions or just talk amongst ourselves. But what you laid out for me was.
Yeah. Let's say if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat on YouTube. One of these guys will look at it and send it to me and I'll ask them. I got my hands sort of full here. So we'll get to your questions as soon as we can, and we'll be more than happy to take any information, any requests, questions you have, anything you want us to cover. Please feel free to add that to the chat.
We actually have a question right now. What mic do you use or recommend for your setup? If we want to jump into that now.
Wow. You're going to start with microphones.
Wow, that they're just going straight for the heart of it, huh?
Oof.
Well, let me answer that. Hopefully that question will be answered with my presentation, because I'm going straight to our church can't meet. What do we need to do to get online? Or we've been online before, how can we make it better? And I'm going to try to answer that in 10 slides or less. All right, so am I good, Robert? Slides up?
You are good to go.
Awesome. All righty. So how to keep your ministry online and thriving during this pandemic. So I came up with this lovely acronym, and yes, I was writing it out and said, I need a clever acronym so people remember this. What do I need to put my church online? Well, you need to climb, all right? You need a camera, you need light, you need the internet, you need a microphone, and you need a box. And that box is something that's going to convert all that stuff into internet goodness so that everyone can see what you're broadcasting. So these slides are in the show notes on YouTube. So if I go through them quickly and you're like, I didn't quite get that, you can go back and read them. Of course, this is being recorded as well, so you can go back and take a look at it. So instead of going through the slide, I'm just going to go through the slides that explain this slide. So first, the see and climb camera. On the left, you have what I think is the bare bones basics. If you really don't have any infrastructure, this is your C, L, I, and M and B in climb. Well, it's everything but your L, it's your climb, right? It's a camera, right? Your smartphone's a camera. It's your internet connection. There's a radio in it that gets you to the internet. It has a built-in microphone. They're usually not great, but it has one. And it's that magic box that changes all that stuff into digital goodness and sends it out to YouTube or Facebook or your own content delivery network, right? You contrast that with the six-figure camera on the right that you'd see at TV studios with the giant box lens and the studio monitor and what have you. And there are some churches out there that have what you see on the right. Usually they're broadcast ministries, whether it be It Is Written or Breath of Life or what have you, or they're just a very large venue and they need such a large professional piece of gear. Most people will be somewhere in the middle. All right, so light. Flashlight on the left is not going to do you any good in any circumstance. But here's the thing, some light is better than no light at all. Videography is like photography. No light, no picture, no matter how good your camera is. And the cheaper the camera, the better they perform with light. If you're really, this isn't a later slide, we'll say it now. If you're really in a pinch, find someplace quiet outside or find, say, a vehicle that is, half the cost of the vehicle is making it quiet, shoot in daylight. That's why I see a lot of celebrity videos and stuff online. They're shooting it in their car because the acoustics are great and you have that big old sun, which is a very, very good light. For those who can afford the scenario on the right where they have an actual lighting grid and you can position your lights in different heights and different intensities like you can, that's great. But again, you're going to probably be somewhere in the middle. All right, the I, internet. If at all possible, you want to have a dedicated internet connection. right? Whether it be your Comcast, your Fios, or your Cox at home, you want to actually plug in. Even if you have that dedicated connection, but you have Wi-Fi throughout your home, you want to be able to plug in that box into some kind of a switch, right? You don't want to rely on Wi-Fi. Use Wi-Fi if you absolutely have to. And in this age of social distancing, you don't really have to compete with your congregants anymore, for that limited bandwidth. But again, worst case scenario on the left, going over something like LTE or 3G or even 5G, sometimes you'll get really, really fast speeds, but you're looking more for a reliable connection that's at an adequate speed instead of a fast, jittery, or kind of up and down speed. Some people, if you're in New York, you're experiencing this right now, where you might have like 100 megabits per second or really fast 1 second, and the next second, it reminds you of the old days of dial-up where it took, 20 seconds to get a single email. All right. What's the M? Microphone. On the right is a nearly $4,000 mic. On the left, of course, leftovers from your chicken noodle soup. Again, you're going to be somewhere in the middle. Even if you need to use something like a smartphone or a tablet or a webcam, it'll be so much better. The experience will be so much better if you use an actual microphone. Anything in the $100 to $200 range is much orders of magnitude better than what's built into that webcam or your cell phone. All right. Now, the question was already asked, what do you recommend for a basic setup? Again, you'll go through Climb. You'll need the camera, you need a light, you need an internet, you need a microphone, you need some kind of box. Really, this question is so open-ended because in some circumstances, you have a setup that will cost you literally a few $100s, and then there are people that spend in excess of 6 figures to do the same thing at higher quality. So really, whatever you can afford that has either a USB connector on it, an HDMI connector, that's the type that's at the back of your television and on most laptops now, NDI, I'll go into what that means later, or an SDI connection, which kind of looks like your cable TV connection, right? So a camera that has one of those things on it. If it has USB only, that's more like a webcam. And that'll work with programs like, I'm sure everyone is now getting used to Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or Skype or what have you. They'll automatically work with that sort of thing. If, however, they have HDMI or SDI connections on them, you will need an intermediary capture device to have that work with your software. Now, light, again, natural light is great. If you can shoot in some place with natural light, you should do it. If it's quiet, why not film outdoors? But there are a lot of manufacturers that produce high quality, low cost lights that you can get on Amazon, on B&H. Of course, you can also get them from Sandy Audiovisual. There is a list on, again, on the YouTube page, there's links to my recommendations for your basic setups of pretty much low cost items. A caveat to that, and I'll get that in my eBay slide, is that during this pandemic, a lot of the lower cost items are actually not available, unfortunately. But that's how it is. Internet, again, I use the word here, symmetrical wired connection wherever possible. You're used to seeing download speeds. If only one speed is given for an internet connection, it is how fast you can pull in information from the internet. What's a little different when you're broadcasting on the internet is that you're now worried about your uploading speed or how fast you can get that information from your sanctuary or from your church office or from your home office to everyone else. So at a minimum, you want something like 10 megabits per second if you want to broadcast in HD, right? Microphones. Again, your built-in mic is most likely not going to be great. I happen to be using a built-in mic now, but I'm using a system that is designed for exactly what we're doing right now, conference calling. So it should sound pretty okay on the other end. So again, buy a microphone. And here's probably the most complicated part, is that box, that thing that translates your video into that magic goodness that is digital video on the internet. You can use a dedicated box, and that is the best way to go. But if you already have a computer and you want to make sure you get your ministry online now, there's a lot of good software out there. We're using Wirecast at the moment to put out this stream, which is a software product that you can put on a computer. Right? There are also dedicated boxes like Teradek's Video. We have Osprey's G2. You have so many encoders. They have really expensive ones, like the AWS Elemental encoder. There's a lot out there. But again, you can start with your computer and very good software. There's also software for your phone that's particular to streaming. There's things like StreamYard for your computer, or Ecamm Live that is particularly geared to social media. All right. When you expand to multiple cameras, here's the thing: you really don't want to use a software switcher. You can. There's some good ones out there. There's Livestream Studio. There's vMix, even Open Broadcaster to some extent. But with the price of a inexpensive hardware switcher, you really want to have one of those in the mix before you go out to your magic box. All righty. So why you must use YouTube. YouTube's extremely popular. It has great viewership. You don't have to pay a lot for it up front, if anything. No cost for your file storage, so you can have a lot of data on there and not pay a penny for it. You get the mall effect, which is when you have, like, say, an anchor store, and the little kiosks are there, and you can, on the way to the anchor store, you see all the other merchants. That sort of thing happens on YouTube as well. And it has great closed captioning options. The disability community is not as high up, I think, on the rank of considerations when thinking about streaming ministries. Which is unfortunate. I know at Capitol Hill, on a weekly basis, they have an ASL interpreter, but I don't believe that that's consistently put out on the stream, nor are closed captions. However, on YouTube, they're automatic closed captions. What their computer in the cloud is doing is listening to the sermon and actually captioning that sermon live, and it is pretty good and pretty accurate. So my opposite page, why you shouldn't use YouTube. Now, I'll only go to the underlined part here. I won't say what manufacturer it is, and hopefully it's not mentioned in the text. But one manufacturer of the Magic Box I've been telling you about, one of their managers in support and training said, we cannot control what Google, and Google owns YouTube, or Facebook chooses to do with their platforms. They make APIs, which is a little thing that lets Google talk to your Magic Box, and they can pretty much make them stop working at any time. And here's the thing, they have, right? I remember one Sabbath that, I won't say which product people were using, but several churches across the DMV kind of just went offline because they were using the same software. They hadn't updated the software, but YouTube updated. So all of a sudden they couldn't connect because that API or that interface was broken. One of the other reasons is, and I cut and pasted, I forgot to put in this presentation, I got a notice from YouTube saying, during this time of social distancing, they don't have enough staff to really police content as they would. So for instance, if you had the right to broadcast something, or you had the correct licenses for your content, you were sending that out, but their computer, their algorithm, the automated thing incorrectly flagged it, there's nothing that they could do about it because they don't really have the resources or to do it. So their computer will automatically shut you down. And when you complain about it, well, there's no one to complain to because most people are at home, or they furloughed them, or they're busy doing other stuff, keeping the network up and running. Well, quickly, what about the DSLR? DSLRs are great, right? If you already have a photo camera, right, a traditional photo camera, most likely it has video capability, right? There's a few things to watch out for. Number one is whether it puts any type of overlay onto your video. You don't want that. You don't want to see the ISO or how many shots are left, or the autofocus or any of that other stuff in your picture. So you want it to have a clean output, and it's usually through a miniature HDMI output. It's the same HDMI's on your TV and your laptop, but it's a little smaller. So you have to watch that to make sure one end is smaller and one end is the regular size, so that it can fit into again your Magic Box. Now, you will need to use a Magic Box or a capture card in order to get this to work with your computer. And what that capture card does, and again, there's a list of them online, what that does is makes your DSLR look like a webcam, right? So we can use it with all the software used to Zoom, et cetera. Except these cameras look really, really, really good, especially close up. Now, when you go back to your sanctuary and you're trying to recreate this for the online audience, you'll find that you'll get into some issues with shooting things at a distance and some things that are particular to DSLRs. Now, brass tacks. Again, you're going to click on a lot of the links I sent you. We're going to give you some advice. You're going to go online. You're going to try to buy it. And you're going to see that they're back ordered, not available, not in stock till who knows when. And that's because everyone made a run on webcams, cameras, streaming encoders, pretty much everything you could get your hands on, especially stuff that was on the lower end as far as cost, not quality, but cost. All right. eBay is your secret weapon. Now, I wish I could find it, but I'll find the link and upload a later. My wife did an excellent how to get on streaming media for any profession thing, and it was done literally with a Sony V1U. I remember that name, and look it up on eBay, Sony V1U. You can find them ranging from maybe 150 to maybe $300. And it's an old camera, but it's a great camera. It has an HDMI connection on it, and under good light, it looks great. People are like, what did you shoot that with? I'm like, well, it's a camera that my kid plays with. But beware of junk and read the descriptions carefully. If you see something that says as is or 4 parts only, it is as is or 4 parts only, right? Maybe you'll be able to use the hand strap on it, what have you. Beware of that. And don't be afraid of standard definition stuff. Most of the stuff people are watching, especially on social media, really is in standard definition. And that's like 720 by 480. High definition is either 1080p or 720p, 1280 by 720. It's a much higher resolution, but the things you're watching on your phone most likely are in standard definition. If you can, in the interim, get some good standard definition gear for cheap, that is not a bad option, right? Now, here's the thing. I mean, overall, is that I think the best time to prepare for a crisis is not during the crisis. So the best time, I think, to prepare for normalcy is now. You may want to look ahead to putting together some long-term options for your streaming ministry. Now, quickly on NDI, this is your other secret weapon. This will keep your costs down, your streaming ministry costs down. There's a lot of stuff out there that takes advantage of NDI. And NDI essentially is a technology that takes the place of a cable, right, of a wire. So as I was telling you about that converter box to turn your DSLR into that good stuff, that magic for the internet, well, a device that has NDI in it can talk directly to most of your online streaming software, right? Your phone is one of them. And right now there's a link again in the description for this on YouTube. NewTek is giving their NDI camera, used to be, I think, $20 or something like that. They're offering it for free, as many of the online services are doing to help people cope with this pandemic and communicate. There's a lot of good links and tools and stuff on there. That's free. You can use a higher quality software encoder, use a phone or a bunch of phones, right, as your capture devices, as your cameras, and use NDI as that connection between your phone and your software on your computer without spending any money. All right, that's me. That's all I have, Robert.
Hi everyone, I'm Will Johns. I'm the pastor.
All right, so, well, you caught me off guard with the ending there. And my virtual background is falling apart as my light goes down. Don't mind the
Oh dear.
glitches. These things happen. Thanks, Colin. I wanted to ask a question real quick. I don't want to get too deep into NDI, but both you and I have worked integrating NDI in a lot of different places. In fact, my house is now full of it. Thanks a lot. I think you glossed over the huge benefit of NDI. Just in brief, in 2 minutes, give me the huge benefit of NDI.
NDI is going to replace a lot of current technology. The biggest benefit is that it allows you to route video over the local area network, right? And at some point, it's going to allow you to route video over the wide area network. What does that mean? It means you can keep your cameras at church, right? You can keep your switcher there, right? You could have interaction between your main campus of your church and your remote campuses. Every input, every ProPresenter, every computer screen, every camera, every audio source can be an input to your control center, which in an emergency can literally be anywhere, right? So everything's networked, and it's compressed so it can actually survive on a wide area network. There are other technologies out there that studios use, right? And I'm not going to get into the eggheadedness of that, but really why NDI has been adopted so quickly. It's only like, what, a 3 or 4 year old technology, and literally in thousands of products across manufacturers, right? It's built into ProPresenter. So instead of having to, you remember for those of you who've been doing church ministry for a while, you remember with ProPresenter, you had to have scalers and scan converters and wires and all that stuff and try to do alpha channels, and you wanted to put stuff on the screen and all that stuff. No, you can send an alpha channel from a free piece of software to ProPresenter and have it make it look great. And all you need is a piece of 2 cent per foot Cat5 between them.
Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. I mean, I can sing the praises of NDI for days. I did a setup recently where I use NDI tied into Wirecast and had some laptops just, instead of having to connect them with encoders, they were sending their feed into Wirecast direct, and it was great.
Yeah.
I was able to do double boxes. I was able to do all sorts of things that I couldn't even do with my switcher. So I'm a big fan of NDI. We can honestly have a whole weekend just talking about NDI.
You could. I mean, you can get deep into it, but I know it's not the thing. So I know I glossed over it, but I didn't want people's eyes to glaze over it.
Yeah, that's true. So thanks for that information. Next, we're going to go to Pastor Will Johns.
Can we jump in and just make sure we answer the question, if that's cool?
Oh, no,
sure,
go ahead, go ahead.
For the microphones we're using, so I'm using a HyperX cloud gaming headset. It's just nice for these types of conference calls because it's pretty light pressure for long-term use. The microphone sounds a little tinny, but it does the job. Another alternative that I've recently purchased is with the new Rode NTG shotgun mic. It's the video mic NTG. That's another option. As in general, I would say you have to get the tool for your use case. If you're looking for higher quality audio, given the fact that the person asking had studio in their name, I'm assuming they may want to look at studio options. As it turns out, in the cases back there, I have a couple studio mics that I built myself. If you can find the right DIY kit, you can find great sounding mics that will give that Neumann that Colin presumably showed in that presentation a run for its money for a fraction of the price. Price doesn't necessarily mean quality if you know where to find it. There are some options out there on the low end, but I would say it varies on your use case. Typically for these types of things though, get something that's direct, got a pretty good rejection if you can, and you don't have to break the bank to get something reasonable.
It's funny. I went on a mic buying spree a while ago, and I ended up buying a couple of different lower ends just to test them out. Back when money was flush, and I ended up with a pair of matching TASCAM PC. It's a long name, TC1 PS blah blah blah. I'll get it in the link to Colin. But those worked great for my voice. They may not work for everyone's voice, but they worked really well for my voice. I've ended up replacing them with Roadcasters with the podcast microphones, but I really like those Tascams, and I think the pair was $100.
Yeah, there is something to be said as far as looking at it from the broadcast audio side. Generally speaking, we have a standard mic that we use to cover our entire praise team when we have regular church. Those mic capsules don't suit every voice, but it's usually passable because we compress and jam and EQ them all together to sound very cohesive. If you're looking at a single source, it is worth going and doing a little bit of shopping and looking at things outside of the pandemic, especially when you're coming to a pastor. If they want to get a new mic, get something that's going to be comfortable for them, get something that they're going to want to use the windscreen on, get something that's going to be, give you a reasonable gain out of it. It's worth spending the time to get it right, because if you can have an expensive mic, if they don't want to put it on or they don't wear it properly, it's useless. So that's just something to consider thinking outside of the scope of where we are right now. But for now, get what you can. You can do a lot with something that's inexpensive. Really, a lot. If you have the know-how, you can really make a lot of things that are kind of on the cheaper end sound great. If you can post-process it for canned videos and stuff, then EQ, compression, those types of tools are your friend. All right.
I'll just jump in real quick and say this too. And if you're not sure, we're here to build a community. So, definitely reach out to any of us on this call right now, or, we'll try to, put out some information, I guess, a place where you can reach us all. So that way we can build this up, and answer the questions and actually try to work with you in your use case. I think that's one of the bigger takeaways that's also important about why we're doing this today.
Exactly. I think Karel said it the best. We're trying to build that community. All right, so we're going to go to Pastor Will Johns and go through his presentation. And we thank him for being able to send it in ahead of time. He did say he was sorry he couldn't make it, but we always did want a pastor to be a part of this so we can get their point of view. It's not all about technology. Someone's actually got to get up there and preach.
Hi everyone, I'm Will Johns. I'm the pastor of the Tech Road campus of Beltsville Adventist Church, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to share with you through this medium, video, and really this is what we're talking about, is how to connect online and use virtual means to share information, and I just appreciate the opportunity that I have to share with you this evening. I want to talk about how we can connect and communicate with issues of technology and communication in a church setting. One of the things that we often see is that we have our tech people over here and our pastoral staff or leadership over here, and sometimes the two do not connect, and there's conflict and issues there. So I want to speak to both sides of the equation, and hopefully have a few thoughts that can be helpful there. First of all, I would say to those of you who are on the leadership side of things, make sure that you listen to the people that understand the technology better than you do. First of all, be humble and recognize that you're not an expert in this area, that there are other people that know a lot more than you do. I have to admit that to myself all the time. I've always considered myself a pastor that understood technology, but I recognize that I'm way behind the curve of those who are on the cutting edge. And so I take their recommendations with much more weight than my own. The other thing that can happen in leadership is you need to cast vision, but allow the person that understands the technology to get you there through the means that they know is best. You wouldn't like it if somebody asked you to do a 5-mile loop to accomplish something when you could simply walk across the street. And so don't ask them to do it in the most complicated way possible. Let them know what your end goal looks like, and then ask your technology person to do it in the way that they think is best, and allow them the freedom to get you the results that you need in the way that they know works best for them and through the technology. So that's some counsel for those of you on the leadership side. If you're on the tech side and you're trying to speak up to leadership and help them, then I would suggest something very similar, and that is ask for clarification as to what the end result looks like, and then give them the tools and the means and the suggestions as to the shortest, quickest, most efficient way to get there to that end result. And then also clarify with them how much time and energy do you expect me to put into this particular project, because they may be asking you to do something that takes 30 hours, but in their minds they think it will only take 3 hours. And so you need to clarify those types of questions, let them know what the cost will be in terms of your time and energy, and hopefully through this means the two groups can get on the same page. And when that happens, that's when exciting things start to take place. And that leads me to the next item that I would challenge you to be aware of and to take into account. And that is, think about the end user experience. So both technical people and leadership people, they need to think about, if we're talking churches, what does the member out there, the member of the congregation, what's their end user experience? This is something that I think we can all learn from Apple and other companies that have taken an enormous efforts and energy to try to figure out, how do we make that end user experience the best it can possibly be, as simple as possible. The more simple, the fewer clicks that somebody has to make to get to where you want them to go to access your online worship or whatever other online resources and so forth, as Zoom, Sabbath School, or whatever you're doing right now. The fewer clicks it takes for someone to get there, and the simpler it is for them to get there, the more likely they are to show up. It's the same principle as the closer someone lives to your church, the more likely they are to come to your church. If they have to drive 2 hours, they probably won't come. And the same thing is, if they have to go through 15 to 20 clicks to find you, they're not going to do that. So how do we make that end user experience as easy and simple, as accessible as possible? And we need to think about the vast range of technological ability that we have with the members of our congregation. Some are super quick, they're faster than most, they have no issue, but we need to think especially about those that may have a challenge with it. How do we make it easy for them? How do we give them resources and help them? Do we have people on staff that could call some of our members that we think might be struggling to utilize technology and walk them through it? Give them the help, the support they need to connect and utilize those resources. So this is something we always want to have in mind as we're creating things for the church. Finally, I'll just say very briefly some of the things that we've been doing here at Beltsville Adventist Church that we found to be effective. We've been using Church Online. It's a resource from lifechurch.tv, and they allow you to create your own URL. So ours is beltsvillesda.churchonline.org. And that's where we're broadcasting our virtual worship service right now. The reason we've used that resource is because they have a really great chat feature. And just this last Sabbath, we had 103 people on there in the chat room chatting during the worship service. And we feel like that creates a much higher level of engagement than just sitting and passively watching a screen. Through the chat feature, we're able as a staff to see who's online. We hear prayer requests. People comment on the points that are mentioned in the sermon. People are greeting each other and saying hi, which is something we've lost because we're going virtual. So they have a little bit of that lobby experience. Hi, happy Sabbath. We're here. The Johns family is here. And people are wishing each other happy birthday. So there's a lot of positive things happening in that chat experience that we've been very excited about as well. And so this is just another reminder that there are free resources out there. Other people are giving away the stuff that they worked very hard to create, and they're giving it to other churches. And so search for that, look for that, talk around for that. You can find those types of resources all over the place online. And when you utilize them, you instead of reinventing the wheel, you take what someone else has done, make it your own, and then drive traffic there. Let me say one other thing that's worked very well for us. About 4 years ago, we went to an online newsletter platform. We've been using BombBomb, but there's others, MailChimp and things like that. And each week, I do a video kind of like this. That's why I have this curtain background already set up here. I do a video that's kind of the header of the newsletter, and then we have all of the information of what's happening at our church every week. Goes out once a week on a Thursday to our church members. And so we've been able to continue utilizing that during this downtime. And we just put all the links to where we want people to go right there in the newsletter. People are used to receiving that. They know what's going on. They still have some visual contact with me through the email video that's happening. And then we drive traffic where we want them to go through that process. So that's one other thing that we've been using. And I would encourage churches to consider some kind of email newsletter client. The back end of that for us, just for those of you who want to know more of what's happening, is CCB, Church Community Builder. They're basically our online church directory. We manage all of our small groups through CCB, all of our Sabbath school classes, adventurers, pathfinders. If you don't have some kind of church software, church management software that you're using, I highly recommend CCB or something like it. And everyone's email addresses are populated in CCB, and then BombBomb works with that. It pulls the email addresses from CCB, and the newsletter goes out. So it's constantly updated, it's constantly accurate, and it's easy that if someone else needed to come in and take over the system, they could do that. So I encourage you to consider taking some of those steps with your churches. Every step that you take, you're better prepared for the next crisis where we may have a challenge to meet in person. And you're also just moving your church more into the 21st century. You'll probably be better positioned to connect with millennials who prefer doing things online. We've seen that at our Tech Road campus, that the largest Zoom Sabbath school group is our youth group, and we've had like 30 kids meeting on there. And so they embrace it immediately. No challenge for them with something like that. So all of this stuff, don't let it overwhelm you. Wherever your starting point is, just start from there. Don't try to do it perfectly right off the bat. Start doing it in your church. If you don't know who your tech people are, just start doing something, and your tech people will reply and say, hey, I've got a way that you can do this better. And so don't hesitate to get something started in your church. You'll be excited about the results that you see. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to do it imperfectly. This video is clearly imperfect, but it's better than nothing. So that's what I've got to offer today. And so thank you for letting me share. It's a joy to be a part of this conference. And I just encourage you all, go out there and take a next step. Do something to elevate your church's interactions with technology. And I think you'll be glad that you did, and you'll see the kingdom of God continue to move forward as you try these new methods. Take care, and God bless. You all have a wonderful evening.
Well, we want to thank Pastor Will. I mean, really, for just taking the time to record that for us and provide us with that information. A lot of times it's important for us tech heads to understand that there's two sides to this. And we do forget it often. We do concentrate. We get very angry when they don't understand us. But we do have to take the time to understand them, and the fact that they don't understand what we do. A lot of what we do is voodoo. Well, in a church. Okay, let me think of a different description. A lot of what we do is magic. So I guess magic wouldn't work either.
I would say and high theoretical mathematics. Most people have a hands-off notion of math is hard, so go with theoretical mathematics.
That's what we'll go with. Theoretical
Partial differential
mathematics.
equations and that sort of thing.
So now we know who took math in school. So the whole idea is, a lot of times if we don't understand something, we're afraid of it. And even adults, it's the same way. So if I come to you with a long list of equipment that we need, and with this big price tag at the bottom, sometimes people are afraid they're just going to buy that for themselves, and we'll never see it. We'll never get a use out of it. And so I think better communication between the two sides may be incumbent upon us sometimes. And to talk more about that, we're going to go to Mr. Karel Holness.
How you doing, everybody? I guess the big thing that's really important in this time is really understanding, how you can be flexible with your setups. And then also understanding what the needs of the production are. So usually when you're in your locale, in your church sanctuary or wherever you're meeting, you have your program that's already lined out. And usually you're just covering it, recording it, maybe you're streaming it, you've got the setup going on over there. As things have switched over though, now we're all locked up in our houses, we can't leave. So what do you do? There are lots of different options out there. A lot of different churches have taken certain approaches. Some churches have media departments that are capable of being portable and taking their content on the road. And they're able to shoot or produce stuff from the comfort of their houses, or send a small crew out to work with the pastor or whoever the talent's going to be to shoot stuff in a way that will be professional. But that's not the only option. Some churches may not have that capability right now, so we work with what we have. North American division here in North America has really done a really big solid for a lot of our churches. They have an active Zoom account that they have now made open to our local churches, where they can go in and register um, and sign up for the account and be able to host their meetings or their church services there. But the key thing with that is understanding those platforms and understanding how to utilize them and which ways you can best put them to use. Some of the other things that you can do are also to use your laptops and devices that you have there. We've definitely seen things cover the gambit to well produced, all pre taped stuff to semi pre taped with semi live elements, or things where people were doing stuff from their telephones and reaching out to their church congregations over Instagram or YouTube or the church's media page. So then the real question then becomes, though, what are some of the best practices that we can follow, right? I know as in my role, I have had to interact with my church in different ways as we've worked together to come up with different plans for how to approach our service. And, I have set out set of guidelines that I was able to write up real quick, and also provided for those that might do better from a visual representation, send out a YouTube video that was done by a YouTube content creator that covers how to use your telephone to do that. It was very helpful in helping people to learn how to get their framing right, how to get the lighting situations right, how to set up their webcams, how to get the best possible audio that they can get, all cheap and inexpensive options. But as you move forward and wanting to try to do certain things, like at our church, I know that we are trying to add some of our musical elements, which we spend quite a bit of time trying to put together. We wanted to roll those in, so we added those in using hardware. But that takes a little bit of a financial commitment. And, like Colin said earlier, it is very tough right now to try to find some of these pieces of equipment, right? So what are some other things that you can do? They have electronic means of doing some of these switching. Right now, Robert's actually using Wirecast to push this stream out, using multiple computers and a setup he's got at home where he's switching between everything. Some people have hardware devices like this guy right here, that they're able to kind of push out their content, switch around the different items that they have, different shots, and then put that out to the church. Or, they may have a production that's going on with staying within the restrictions, but you're able to kind of control the atmosphere in somebody's home, right? But obviously we know that this commitment is something that, takes a little bit of financial investment. And how do you convey that to the powers that be? Earlier on, some folks may not have known how important it is to actually understand what it takes to get some of these things done and done well, right? And so that comes to a philosophy of how you're going to run your productions at the church, and understanding how to do that and do that properly. And then you bring the media elements to the table, your electronics, and how to work with the talent and all the people that are going to actually be on the production. Having clear meetings is going to be very important, as we mentioned earlier. Going over parameters and how things are going to flow is going to be important. And this is something that you would normally have happen in your church, but more so for how it's going to come together on the internet, in this remote situation, is really, really critical to have conversations. One of the key things for us over at Metro has been to ratchet up the dialogue even more so than we typically would have been communicating through email or through our typical run sheet. So that is important. And getting good communication from the folks that are planning out the program, understanding what their wishes are, and then how you can execute technologically is going to be a critical piece of all of this, right? So as we look to work with our leadership and develop the protocols for how we're going to operate, what may work for one church may not be the same thing or the best way to operate in another church. As I've talked with different media directors around the area and different technicians, you see different approaches for the different types of congregations. Some folks wanted a more traditional service. Some people have gone to a little bit more of like a YouTube format or an Instagram format. And then there's some folks that are kind of in the middle, or they've just completely changed up how they're doing things and interacting. But the key thing here, though, is to try to make sure that they develop the community that they have when they're physically at the building. And that's a key thing to try to keep up, because if you don't, then we pretty much miss the mark for why we're actually trying to do this, right? And so, in trying to develop our way of reaching out to our members, we used different means to try to make sure that we could get the information out. We've used email, we've used Instagram posts, Facebook posts, YouTube posts, putting up as much content out there as we could get up of quality, so that way we can just let the church members know that we're there, right? That's the whole reason why we're here. And so working with the pastors and your elders and your church leadership folks is a critical part of all this. So as we look to try to move forward with a lot of what we do, on the technical side, right? Keep in mind the mission of who you're trying to reach, why you're trying to reach them, and putting together a platform or a program that is going to really get to the heart of them and make them feel connected back to the home base. So, fellas, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of that. I do have some visuals of some stuff that we did. I'll work to try to get those up in a second, but if you guys want to chime in, answer some questions, or have any thoughts on that, I'll take your insight on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had this discussion when we spoke, I guess, a couple of weeks ago with Pastor John from Beltsville, SDA Church. Was an experience that I had as kind of a backstage worker at a large evangelical meeting, with a huge online audience. And essentially, the TD, right, the technical director, was in a spot where they were answering, or not really answering, kind of deflecting, deep theological questions, philosophical questions, health-related questions, just like, I've been sad, desperate, lonely, what do I do? Things like that. And it was awesome. I mean, I didn't bring it up. Pastor John brought it up before, that they make sure that they have pastoral and counseling staff online. That is part of the ministry. To me, that is so much more powerful than the technology itself. I mean, a radio broadcast where, the folks that are listening can call in and get advice from a trained counselor, or, spiritual advice from clergy, to me is golden. That is a key element of any online ministry.
Right. And I mean, making sure that you can reach out to the community and make an impact and really connect with them is a key component to all of it. And, answering those tough questions, because that's the thing. We don't know what people are dealing with, and the glimmer of hope that we can bring by just bringing these programs to them so that they can
Yeah.
Like, so, like, I'm going to share here, if you bear with me, some of the slides that we created for our Church Connect. So as you can see here, we've got our prayer slide. They have 2 times that we do this during the week. Send that out. Really viable way how to reach out with the church, even for those that may have some technological concerns, issues. They are able to connect up with their telephone and get right in and join in with the meeting. Another way that we've tried to connect with folks is to, also keep up our different ministries. So here you'll see our men's ministry slide that we created here. Our men are there praying. They're at 1 o'clock right after our main service is over, and then another big thing that is also important in these times is the fact that we also have are needing to give financially, and so in the case of that, we have created a slide and have had to adapt, right? So we have our traditional ways of giving through our website. We have the Adventist Giving app that has been developed for the church. We provided an option for mailing stuff in, and then we also went to the Cash app. So as we're trying to figure out ways how to maneuver through this, the church is also having to figure out different ways how to maneuver through things as well. And so, being flexible and helping out and trying to figure out the best ways how to approach things is really important. And so, as we move forward through this and try to connect and work with each other, right? The critical thing here is not forgetting the mission why we are doing this in the first place. I think that's critical.
I think that is the most important part. It took us a while at Brinklow to really engage with the online church. We always had the chat feature, but we took it for granted until we had to take down the chat feature for a little while as we were doing a website redesign. And we got, I won't say hate mail, but people were upset because they wanted to be able to connect, and they had no way to connect. So even the people online want to be part of the service, and we do forget that sometimes. I will give a quick anecdote, and then we'll jump right into Alex's portion. Where when I first started doing this many, many, many years ago, remember the gray hairs, our AV director came and read us a letter, and the letter was from a lady in California who was watching our stream, and she saw her daughter in church. So she's in California watching our church in Florida, seeing her daughter in church, and she was so happy because she wasn't sure if her daughter, once they left home, going attending college, whether she was still wanting to be part of the church. And it was a blessing to her to be able to see that. So those type of things, I think we need to share more with our team so that they're uplifted and they know that there's really a purpose behind what we're doing. So last but definitely not least, Alex, what do you want to share with us today?
That's a great question. I have all my notes right here, just ready to share. I think I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about the education side of this, and then to also pivot to a call to action. I think it's important to take this as a starting point for everybody. I think as you look at the circumstances, making the case for having good media is going to be easier and it's going to be very easy to make that case. It's something that is on the table, and it's fresh in people's minds to think about what is it gonna take to provide media services and to do this continuing. I think good technology gets out of the way. Honestly, it's a conduit. It's about building community and sharing that message. And I think if you look on Twitch where people stream games, well, you're saying, well, how can people stream games but they have they have sensitive communities. If you go into any Twitch streamer's channel, you could potentially see hundreds, if not thousands, of people formed in community over video games. How much more can we do with what I'd argue is a more meaningful, more life-fulfilling message, right? You want to get the technology out of the way, but you have to have a basis to be able to be relevant and to compete with other people in terms of, or at least have a certain level of a certain standard of quality. Because to be honest, you're competing against content on YouTube. There are people that their entire goal is to create content for YouTube, and they have millions of subscribers and they monetize their channels and they're developing community. And I think churches can really take a hint from those communities and look at what they're doing. As far as getting up to speed on these things, I personally don't like to reinvent the wheel. I believe that you can get a lot of useful information by looking on YouTube. The example of how to take better video on your phone, I found a 4-minute video on how to take video with your phone, so I don't actually have to explain that to anybody. I can find very nice, curated, cultivated content to describe that specific thing, so I could pass it on to the people that we were doing to have them record their video. YouTube is your friend. There are a lot of learning resources available. Unfortunately, most of them aren't geared towards churches. They're looking for the person that wants to create YouTube videos, or someone who wants to learn how to stream on Twitch for their game so they can build community and, potentially leave their job. But there are a lot of formulas out there and a lot of content geared towards education. So if you're trying to get up to speed on this, I would say Google and then go to YouTube, find a video. Those graphics that we have, that my brother just showed, I created those on free online software. There are a lot of tools that are available, and you can learn how to use a lot of these tools on YouTube. And I think really, as we move on from this, my pivot to the call to action from here is, one, if you think this information has been useful, share it with someone you think would benefit from hearing some of it, because I think that's important. You have to be able to spread, this useful information, if you deem it adequate, to other people so they can benefit. That's one call to action. The other call to action is to engage with us, ask questions. If there's something that comes to mind, there are a lot of resources that are being provided here. We want to continue these dialogues to facilitate creation of a community that's going to be helpful in building a tech workforce. I think the biggest thing for me going forward is, despite the fact that I don't have as many gray hairs as Robert, is I am interested in the business of training my replacement. And to that point, I think, young people have a lot to offer when it comes to these technologies. They're aware of what's hip, hip is an old word. They have a new word to describe that notion, right? They know what these platforms, they can leverage Instagram, they can leverage TikTok, they can leverage platforms you probably haven't even heard of yet. And it's also important to consider, are we making content that speaks to these generations? Because I am in the generation that's known as millennials, but are we looking at Generation Alpha? Are we looking at how to meet their needs? And that's a step below millennials or younger. There's millennials. I'm forgetting the other one, of course, because I'm on the spot right now. I'm not going to remember it. But leverage those tools, create content for them, engage them, ask them questions. You have to be able to foster their development now to be able to have them be an ally and help you. They may make you uncomfortable because they're going to propose that you do things in a slightly different way, but take the risk and find the areas where they could use your insight for those folks that are older. And I think my whole point with my last call to action is, we had been talking about for a while having a media conference to basically start talking about these concepts and developing them. If that is something that you're interested in, if you have specific content that you feel like you can't find an answer for on the internet, we would love to hear that feedback so we can tailor content that would be relevant to a group of people, so we can actually pull this off and get a thriving community and a developing community. Because I think one of the biggest challenge with tech folk in general is you cannot be a one-man band. It's not sustainable. You need to have a team, and you need to train the team, and you need to have strengths, and you need to be able to depend on other people. And I think at a lot of our churches, we have people that are good, and they are the bedrock for a lot of things. But if they have to step away, who fills in the gap? And I guess my point as we close here is to kind of put that seed in your mind. Are you training a replacement? Or if you don't think you can do something, maybe reconsider that notion and try and be amenable to the idea and just contemplate the idea that maybe I can learn something new. This technology isn't rocket science, and I would argue, honestly, the core elements of rocket science aren't necessarily that complicated. It's just you have to be able to take the approach, and that's kind of my point. So as we move on from this, hopefully we gave you some insight on how to succeed now, but I challenge you to pivot with me and look to the future about how you can do development and get into this full time and make it really a ministry that's about people and about community. And I think that's pretty much all I have.
But you've made some really good points. As we start to come out of this, the question's going to be, what's next? And that's the question we're going to have to start talking to our leadership about. What's next? Because if we go back to doing things the same way we did, 2 months ago, then we're just asking for the same problems that we had a month ago. Our time is a little bit short, but I did want to cover that question that came in. I know, Colin, you already started to answer it, but I did want to cover that question. So go ahead and read it out and then give your solution.
Oh dear, which question? Okay. Several questions have come in since.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which one?
Okay, Denver Wright had a really good question.
Oh. Okay. So Denver Wright said, I have a situation where I've been asked to submit a proposal for a church that has no media at all. There are two factions on the committee. Half of them want me because of productions that they have seen me do for other churches, but the other half wants to use an audio company that did their audio system in the past. The audio company wants to install a system that uses Wirecast and a PC they build. I want them to purchase a TriCaster Mini 4K. I know that either system will work, but I believe the TriCaster provides more features and better professionalism than Wirecast can. Your thoughts? Yeah, so here's the interesting one of that, and the disclaimer, that I probably should have had at the beginning of my presentation was that pretty much any product you mention here, I sell. Because I sell over 2,500 different brands, and within those brands are whoever knows how many products, right? So I'm not arguing against myself or anything. I'm just saying what's the best thing for the situation, because I sell both Wirecast and the TriCaster. So in this instance, I advised Minister Wright here to find a balance, right? You wouldn't go out and put up a couple of speakers on sticks and have like a $2,000 audio budget and then spend, $10,000 to $20,000 on a TriCaster. That doesn't make too much sense unless you have a, 30-person church and you had like 500 people online, right? Perhaps that would seem to be some sort of balance there. But what we usually see is, we have a $200,000 sound system and like a $5,000 video system. I think because the script has been somewhat flipped because of COVID, that we now see that, well, the $200,000 sound system is stuck in the church that I can't go to, and I still have these mouths to feed spiritually over here online. But I haven't made the investment into my online ministry. That said, The easy thing, the complete system, sure, he could go to TriCaster all day long. But here's the thing, TriCasters are expensive. Wirecast relatively is not. So if you can get someone to build a box, donate a box, Wirecast might be the thing in their budget. It really is a balance, what their overall budget is. Without knowing that, you really can't make a good decision. Sure, the TriCaster is an excellent device. Sure, it's easy to learn. It has all the bells and whistles in it right out of the box. It's a dedicated device. But we're using Wirecast right now, and we're accomplishing our goals, right? So it's really a nuanced answer to say it depends.
Oh, that's a cheap answer, but it's true. It's true.
But it's true.
It's really about balancing, because I went the other route for our church. I actually built the box that we run Wirecast on. It's sitting right down here now, because of budget issues, where we recognized we want to do this, but we had this much money. Okay, there we go. We had this much money. So we had to come somewhere in the middle where we can do a majority of what we want to do. Is it as good as the TriCaster? No. But it can do what we want to do. I can train the volunteers. That's the other thing. If you don't have dedicated staff, you have a couple of hours a week to train people on how to use things. So you have to weigh that as well. Did you get any more questions?
We want to know contact information. I'm not sure who TPCBC is. I guess I could look that up or click on it, but wanted to stay in touch with us after this session. We didn't do a slide or anything like that, did we?
With our contact information?
How do people get in contact with Karel and Robert and Alex?
We'll put it in the description and below in the video.
Yeah, you'll go ahead and do that for us, Colin.
I've been voluntold. Okay.
If you want my contact, you contact Karel.
Listen, this has been another one.
You had a question, Robert, that I answered offline that I see here on the screen.
Yeah, because there's so many different capture cards, and one of the things, certain devices are easier to get right now than others. So if you have an HDMI camera, and I wish I had mine, my old Canon HDMI camera, you can use that with a capture card and Zoom will see it, and it's a higher quality than what I have on the laptop. So even though it's old, it's got to be at least 3 years old.
There you go. Like this?
No, it's even smaller than that. It's an actual camcorder. Okay, going way.
Oh, like a handy cam. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've been thinking about buying one of those.
But they're still available.
Yeah.
So if you can match that up with the right capture card, you can bring your production up, whereas you can't find a webcam anywhere.
So what you really have to look for, I think this is what we really need to tell people, is that you want to see a capture device with the logo UVC on it. If it has that, it stands for USB Video Device Class, which essentially means it's going to act like a webcam. But remember those 3 letters, UVC. If you see that on any product, right? If they don't say UVC, likely it is not, and it will not work with. And it will not work with your. Apparently, the solar installers are still here at night, but UVC. If you see that on the marketing material or on the packaging, it will work just like a webcam. So it'll work with GoToMeeting, it'll work with Zoom, it'll work with WebEx, it'll work with Wirecast, it'll work with all of that stuff on either Mac, Windows, or Linux, but it's got to have that UVC. So the brand is not as important for compatibility as seeing those 3 letters.
I will say this as well. I'm a big fan of eBay. I'm also fairly frugal. Some people will call it cheap, but I'm frugal. I try to, if I see an item is a certain price, I'll see if I can find something comparable that's less. There is a huge downside to that. Sometimes it's better just to go with what you know works. Otherwise, you'll have a stack of equipment that you've saved money on that doesn't work. So just keep that in
Yeah.
mind when you go out there and you buy things.
I am a
Penny
proponent.
wise and pound foolish.
You know?
Yeah, I will say this. There is something to be said about buying quality for quality doesn't necessarily mean price. Do your homework. It will behoove you to do your homework. I will also
Yes.
say this. You have to be mindful of what your workforce can do. If you have a bunch of guys that are people, that's a little exclusive. If you have volunteers, including females, everybody, that is into reading manuals and they will get up to speed on that, then you can do that. If not, you may want to go with the option that has, a YouTube series on how to use this device, get it up running, do basic operations.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you buy quality, when it comes to DSLR lenses, when you put money into the lenses, those are investments that will carry forward and retain value for years to come. You can buy cheap and you can suffer the consequences. I have purchased inexpensive HDMI cables and I got black flares on my stream. Sometimes it's worth paying the money
Yes.
to get that quality.
Yes.
And the other thing is too, if you're gonna buy and put together a system, try to think ahead of where you're trying to get to, if at all possible. Okay, so if you need a 8-channel mixer right now, but you think there's capacity to go to 16, think about that 16, right? Don't stay stuck in this is what we need right now.
Future-proof yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Future-proof whenever you can. If you can find, if there's not a diminishing return in terms of how much you're spending, there's going to be a sweet spot. You're going to get more value going up the curve until it starts to have a diminishing return.
Mm-hmm.
If you can future-proof yourself, I would say do it. When it comes to computing, you probably don't want to be on the cutting edge. It's not worth it. Being somewhere in the middle, perfectly fine. Other places, it may be beneficial to spend more because it will last you longer. It means there's a cost calculus that you have to do. Sometimes you can buy 3 of something because they're just so cheap that you can afford to have it break 3 times before you get something. But that's typically not the way you want to have to operate.
No. And I think we can all agree, treasurers don't want to see you multiple times for the same thing.
I can imagine not.
So you can't come in September and say, hey, we need to get this new device. Okay, it's $1,600. Okay. And in May, not even May, April, we need to get this new, wait, didn't I just write you a check for that? The ink hasn't even dried. Go away. That's what you're going to get.
Hey, Robert, I have a proposal. One, we should answer this question before we go out. I assume everyone's okay with spending a few extra minutes, but I don't think we should try to squeeze in a discussion on making sure the tithe and offering are returned to the storehouse during the pandemic, because I think that is a whole long conversation that I know for a fact that some churches are just suffering. They have no one's coming in, no one can come in. They haven't embraced any of the online technologies, Adventist giving online, Cash App, what have you, just haven't done it. And I think we need to have a separate discussion on that alone, but could probably answer Minister Wright's question.
Is there a box I can get to capture, send to internet without a computer?
Man, this is like a cherry pick for the A10 Mini Pro that just got announced. It's like the perfect setup. So I have been doing a stream for a beauty company called Niche Beauty. We started getting up to speed 3 weeks ago, 2-camera shoot, pretty simple. I use the A10 Mini for that. They just announced last Friday the A10 Mini Pro. So the ATEM Mini Pro is coming. It will have the ability to have an encoder on it, and you'll be able to send straight to the internet to a endpoint without a computer.
You know,
Okay.
Wirecast also makes a box. It's called Wirecast Gear. Now, I was supposed to get one of those to test it out, and
Okay.
the deal fell through. So I don't have any experience with it, but that is supposed to
So
do the same thing.
I know there's one person online, South Caribbean Media, that I saw ask a question earlier, has a Wirecast gear.
Oh, really?
I know that
Okay.
because I sold it to them, and they love it.
Okay.
But I think what Brother Wright is talking about is not having any kind of big iron at all, whether it be a PC or a PC-based switcher like the Wirecast gear or TriCaster, anything like that. And I think I have one solution of something that he might already have, that a lot of churches have. Look at your PTZ cameras. Some of them actually have encoders built in.
Mm-hmm.
I usually use it as a backup emergency type thing. I know, if my laptop blows up, if my TriCaster goes down, if my ATEM dies, if my Elemental goes belly up, I know I can turn on that encoder in the PTZ camera and still get my stream out, at least a one camera shoot that can move around. So Minray, PTZ optics, let's see.
Sony.
Who else? Panasonic,
Yep.
Sony. Many of them have encoders built into the camera. So you can log into the camera, like plug it into your network or plug directly into it if you know its IP address. Go on its webpage. You'll see a section where you can actually enter in the information for YouTube or for Facebook or for IBM Watson Video or for live stream or for whatever platform you're using, right? And you'll have to, I guess you kind of have to trigger it from your computer, which is kind of going back to it. But any IP device, really. It doesn't have to be, you can do it over your phone right? Your phone has a browser, anything with a browser on it, your tablet, what have you, really old junky thingy that just needs to be fast enough to open up a simple web page and type in that information. You can go, or as a backup, here's best practices. And I didn't want to go too far off on the best practices is you have that camera set up as a backup anyways. All that information is already typed in. You just have to trigger it in the event of an emergency. So look at your camera. You might already have the capability you seek. Okay,
so we got another question that just came in. Are PTZ cameras really good? Okay. Well, listen. Let's start with how much do you want to spend? Okay.
True.
Hang on 1 second.
Oh dear.
See this one? Now this is not mine. This is a loaner. I have to return it. But this camera is really good. This camera is really $5,000. So you can get good PTZ cameras. Colin loaned me, what was it? It's got to be about 5 years ago now, where you loaned me the PTZ optics camera, and I did a review on it, and I loved it so much that I bought one. So PTZ optics is not super expensive, but you can still get a good quality. Now, in low light, I think they shine more in low light than some of the other cameras, but let me say that backwards. I said that backwards. They shine in better light than some other cameras. The Sonys, you can use them in almost pitch black and they'll still show good. So as in most things, it depends on how much you spend.
I guess that speaks to hierarchy, though. So if you have to have hierarchy of creating online content, you want to be heard first. You want to light it second, right? Lighting. If you have good lighting, you can use a bad.
Yes.
A worse camera.
Yes.
Right. Where we go? What do we go next after lighting? A composition. You want to get a good composition. You want to make sure you lock in the composition. I can't talk because of all this, but good composition.
Listen, I got a fake background, so. I don't, I, you know,
Okay.
I think in this day and age, we've seen that really getting your message out there is more important than how pretty it looks. Um, those who are able to get their message out there quickly, I think, have been able to do better. We were talking about the funds. I can say from experience that people are more willing to give if they see you're doing something. So the churches that are going to suffer the most are those that aren't doing anything.
We have an online answer to this question, which is no. I think that is to the question, are PTZs good? I mean, but honestly, it really matters your style and what your content is.
Yeah.
So if you have a worship leader or minister, pastor that I call him a rabbit. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is being recorded. But that's what we call him in the control room when you pace back and forth across the rostrum, right? You know, we'll be there and be like, we got a rabbit this morning. Yeah.
Everything's a wide shot.
The cheaper your PTZ, and this is for the rabbit pastors who are looking at acquisitions and wondering, why does this camera cost so much? It's because of you, right? You have two major costs, well, maybe three major costs with your camera. Your optics, and I mean everything from the glass to the sensor back out to the wire out the thing. Your optics, right? Your motor, right? And the build.
Yep.
So your motor, you'll see like you have some tiny cute little PTZs, all right? The reason the big PTZs are so chunky is because they're using a very heavy, finely tuned motor to have very smooth, beautiful motion, so it can kind of match a human being as it moves, as it pans and tilts. Those cameras are very expensive. You're looking at like the Sony X1, BRC X1000s or the BRC H900s.
Yep.
Excellent cameras. They move beautifully. They have good optics, good glass, all the others, but they're extremely expensive. But here's the thing. If you are a stationary pastor and your technical director or your style of broadcasting is that you frame your shot, you stay still, and then you switch to that shot. It really doesn't matter how bad your tripods are, your camera operators, how rigid or whatever your PTZs are, because you're just worried about video quality now. How good are your optics? You get the shot, you stay still, you go to that shot. If you have to move, you're looking at either get a less expensive camera and get the volunteers to move that camera to follow you, or you're looking at very high-end PTZ cameras. You're looking at least $4,000,
yep.
Right? You might get some trade-off with size and motor and what have you, and relatively decent optics. But the really good ones, if you're moving all over the place, you have a lot of motion, you're looking closer to five figures.
And he had a tag-on question onto that one, so we'll cover that one quick too, which is it says it's best when you use more than one PTZ camera for a broadcast.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
oh boy.
Oh yeah.
You know, but the big thing too is also making sure you have the personnel to be able to move them, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a limited staffing situation, you know, yeah, that one you got there, the control, you know, can take in multiple cameras.
Yeah.
And
all controllers are not made equal.
Right. No, they're not. So, you know, it's all going to depend on what you got to do, and especially if you're going to be switching, you know, live or doing some other stuff, you know, with graphics or whatever things you're going to add, you know, elements. You're going to.
I will add one thing. So depending on the format of your service, if you're doing it live, you have fewer options. If you're doing pre-recorded or pre-taped, you can't fix everything in post. Try and get it as close to perfect on the intake. But if you have to do pre-recorded video, all the YouTubers will tell you the jump cut can be your best friend, and you can edit. And I know it's terrible, but the thing is, if you're not used to presenting live, it can be rough having the ums and ahs. I'm only saying that for certain things in your video packages. I'm not saying that you should do it. I think the YouTube content is different. It is worth saying the YouTube content is a different flavor than your church production. You have to be mindful of it, but there are also creative ways how to hide edits. You can jump from a wide shot to a closer shot. A lot of the things on Masterclass are shot in 4K. They push in because it's in 1080p. They take a tight shot on the cut. You're good to go. It makes it seem like there's another perspective. You can switch to a second camera. I'm only putting that out there because we had one of our things for our church service was to do pre-recorded content. We had to get creative with the edit. It's worth pointing out.
I also see, I think we went on the wrong tangent in answering one of the questions. They clarified, instead of a computer, they really want, again, my magic box to the stream. So I think the question was, what are the good independent encoding boxes out there? And I think earlier we mentioned Teradek. They have a line of prosumer and professional. The prosumers are the videos, the professionals are the cubes. They're excellent encoders. Osprey, who are famous for making excellent encoder cards, now have standalone encoders. So their G2 Talon is an excellent standalone encoder. Videon, I believe they're based pretty close to here in Pennsylvania. They have an excellent line of encoders. If you want to go high end, then you're talking like High Vision, their Makito series, Barracuda, what have you, some aggressive fish, and AWS Elemental. Again, they have a very divergent line of high-end encoders and cloud variations of that as well. But there's a lot of good stuff out there if you just want a box that encodes standalone.
Oh, one last thing about the PTZ cameras. Last thing, I promise. That our church was never built to have people stand up and use cameras. And so there's actually no space. If we put on sticks, the fire marshal would come and get rid of us. So we've been forced to use PTZs. And the reason why I keep picking up the controller is this can determine whether you get really good, smooth shots, even with expensive cameras, rather than jerky, So when you think about these purchases and you're trying to see where you can save money, the truth is, if you stay consistent with your price points, you'll do far better than if you throw a ton of money into your cameras and then buy cheap cables. That will kill you. You buy cheap controllers, or you buy cheap ends. Just be consistent along the line of whatever purchases you're making, and you'll be far better off.
It is worth saying investing in infrastructure will get you quite a bit further.
Yes.
Just as much as, the same analog. If I'm looking at a DSLR, I'm buying lenses, I'll keep that glass, but I may get rid of the body when they get a new sensor.
Right.
Your infrastructure will go quite a bit farther. So it's not a great place to skimp on if you can help it.
No, not at all.
$5,000 camera into a bad cable, you're done. You can't see anything if it's black.
I have lines across the screen.
Yeah. Why does the picture keep going in and out? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
okay.
This has been great. And I hope we'll do it again. And I'm not sure who said it. Oh, Alex said it. Let's spread this out. If you feel you've gotten good information, spread it out. And then let people ask us to do it again. There's so many topics we haven't even touched on that we have not had time to discuss that we'd be more than happy to discuss. As you can tell, we like to talk. And we like to talk about technology. We like to talk about God. We like to talk about worship. Each one of us has invested our own time, our own talents, and often to the detriment of family. Anyway, each of us has invested time and energy into our ministries. This is our ministry. So we have to remember that we're serving God in everything that we do, and we try to give our best. And if that means helping someone else bring up their ministry, we're all for it. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
was a
I'm just
pleasure.
glad I mean, I hadn't met Karel or Alex until very recently, so I'm just glad we're able to pull this together and really share some stuff online. And I'm looking away from you because I'm looking at you instead of at you. But I'm just glad that we were able to do this. And I'm very happy that Pastor Johns was able to join us virtually, and hopefully we can have the entire band together next time. In fact, I'm actually looking forward to being in the same room. How about that? I'm excited about being in the same room with you all. We can present at the same time in the same place.
I'll have to get someone else to switch then.
It's fine. We'll get someone trained. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming I'm back, though, I feel like that jump cut comment's gonna get me 5 minutes in the in timeout. Sorry, Robert.
I went to school a long time ago, and that was like the worst thing you could ever do. And now it's the only thing you could ever do.
I know, but for brevity, man, time is money. People want to see what you have to say and keep it moving.
I wow. Know. Studio 279 is from Trinidad.
Yes.
I'm not sure what time it is in Trinidad, but I don't know what is a Trinidadian greeting, but hello.
Pastor Wright wants you to Pastor Wright, we'll get that information put up there for you. I think you ran.
Please give me that encoded information again slower. I know, I'm trying to spit it all out there as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, to wrap this thing up in a nice little tight bow, just stay mindful of the mission of why we're doing this. The ability to be flexible is highly important right now.
Oh yeah.
To have patience.
Yeah.
And to work with everybody as best you can. And we understand even that there may be just one person that is holding up the entire church on their shoulders, right? To try to push through these technological things. We're here for you as a resource and as a group. Like we said, we'll have the contact information for you guys down in the comments. And anything you need, share the information, send it out to those that might need this information. Bring back some topics for us so that we can kind of discuss these things and get this stuff out for you, because we know what it's like to struggle, and we want to try to help you guys out as best we can. Mm-hmm. That's the big takeaway for this. And on that note, I'll just say that we appreciate you, and thanks for sticking with us and allowing us to bring this stuff to you guys. And we look forward to talking to you at another time.
And you can close us out with prayer, Karel.
All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the opportunity to get together to talk on this topic in this media forum. Father God, we just ask you to please be with those that have sat here and watched this presentation. May it spark interest in them or answer questions that they might have, and give them the information that they need to figure out the solution that'll best help them missionally with their church. Lord, I thank you for each of the people on this call, and I also thank you for the participation of Pastor Will. All this information was a huge resource, and we thank you for it, and we just ask you to continue to use each and every one of us as we try to make an impact for your kingdom. We thank you for giving us the ability to breathe and just the ability to bring this information in a time that is so tumultuous. Please be with each one of the people that watch this presentation and continue to bless them and keep them in good health. All this we ask in your precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Don't forget to say a prayer for the first responders. And we go dark.